Welcome to the Epic Success Podcast, where you train your brain for seven figures. My name is Dr. Shannon Irvin, and this is you're listening to a top 25 podcast that is dedicated to helping you grow the way you think so that you can have the freedom, the impact, and the influence to honor God and step into that big calling as an entrepreneur where you change lives, change your own family's lives, and make a difference in the world. So cannot wait to have you listen this week. Let's go. This week, I'm going to talk all about the linchpin to making 10K and above months in your business. And I'm talking multiplication factors, like getting to 10, getting to 20, getting way past six figures, multiple six figures into seven figures and beyond. This linchpin, and I want to define what that word linchpin. It's the one thing that causes it all to work. The one thing that causes it all to work. And if you have that linchpin or that missing piece, then it all works. And so this week, I'm going to be diving deep into why the only thing that matters for you right now is to train your thinking like a seven-figure entrepreneur so that you can become one so much faster. It is the thing that most entrepreneurs think about. And if you pause for a second, you've probably had this conversation in your mind of like, oh, I wish I knew what to do at the right time, or I wish I could just make this decision and it all would work right for me. Or the conversation when it starts to get so busy, you start to think I'm overwhelmed, or the idea that I'm overthinking, like I just am constantly looking at all of the potential negative outcomes and I'm ruminating on those over and over again. And I'm telling myself, if I could just figure this out, and what our human minds want to do is to look for the doing to make that happen. And by the way, this is not your fault. You were actually trained this way in our educational system. And I will do my best to not go on a rant right now, but I want you to pause and think for a second. Like when you were going to school from kindergarten all the way through high school, and yes, on through college, we are taught a few very, very indoctrinating specific things. Number one, we got to raise our hand to ask anything. That's asking for permission. Do you find yourself asking for permission or looking outside of yourself for the authority to say you're walking in the right way, right? Or we get our validation from what we do. If we got an A in the classroom, we felt like what we did meant we were valuable. And when we think about someone else telling us our value, and it's all tied to activity, how I did on a test, what report I turned in, the doing. Now, the linchpin is it's not the doing that gets you to seven figures. Yes, you have to do a strategy, but it's not the doing that gets the strategy to get you to six figures and beyond. And this is the secret or the missing piece that all 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs know. And you hear them talking about it, but then they will sell you the strategy that they used. And so you buy more and more strategies, more and more courses, because you think they're going to reveal this thing. And the thing is they've trained their thinking to align with where they want to be, not with where they are currently. And so this is exactly why we offer our 67-day-a-year coaching program, because it is the linchpin that literally, when you train your thinking to think like a seven-figure entrepreneur, you step into things like time management in a way that you know this, right? You see 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs, they seem to be everywhere all the time. They seem to have all the time. They're always on vacation. You're seeing all these pictures and you're thinking to yourself, I am killing myself over here to make it work. Like you're comparing that and you're like, wait a minute, why does it work so easily? Why do they have so much more time than me? The difference being is they think differently about time, where they spend their focus, where we focus on. And last week's podcast, I dove into this concept of earthly or low vibration thinking versus heavenly or higher energy thinking that actually gets you to 7 and 8 figures. And we broke that down. So I'm not going to go back there. If you did not listen to last week's podcast, make sure you go back and listen to that because it's super powerful. But today's podcast, I'm really wanting to show you why it is vital for you as an entrepreneur to stop chasing more strategies, the quick fix, be on more live events and challenges and all the strategic things. Because if you are honest with yourself, where you've spent your time, you almost have a PhD in entrepreneurship. You've learned and you've learned and you've learned and you've learned. The learning and the knowing is not the problem. And if you get honest and just sit still with your spirit, like, I know what to do. And I tell my coaches this in certification all the time, you know what to do. There's not a lack of knowledge, yet you'll still seek more knowledge to solve the problem. And that is what I was talking about in this educational system that indoctrinated all of us into my value comes from my doing. My who is mixed up with my do versus that unleashed entrepreneur, that person who's trained their thinking. They think like a 7-figure entrepreneur and therefore they get to 8, or they think like that 7-figure entrepreneur. Therefore that 6-figure business comes quickly, is that they know they focus on, in the time category, the 2 or 3 things that makes the biggest difference. Now, you knew that already, yet still our brains in this level of lower pattern thinking keep us very busy in the doing. I got to do social media. Okay, I got to be in this social media. I got to be on Threads. Now I got to, and the list goes on and on and on and on. And listen, I speak about this so passionately because I remember sitting on the floor of my office, bawling my eyes out because I had all the mentors, I had all the steps, all the courses. And just like you, I did all the work. Like, I took all the steps in these strategic based courses, yet still it wasn't working. And I know how frustrating it is because there's this big dream I had attached to the results. And that's another thing that is a difference between those that are training their thinking to 7 figures versus those that don't. When I was able to release the results, I talked about that last week, so I'm not going to get distracted here. But I sat on the floor so frustrated, literally crying my eyes out, not because mostly because of what was attached to becoming successful as an entrepreneur. I don't know about you, but like, I really wanted the freedom, the income, of course, but the ability to change people's lives was so important to me. But let's just, truth be told, I absolutely wanted to help people change people's lives. That's the core of me. I am a servant at heart. And at the same time, I wanted to see my children have evidence that doing hard things paid off. I'm getting choked up again thinking about this. I wanted my children to be able to see not my words, but an example of going for your dreams and having it work out. I wanted an example. I wanted to create, and let me know if this is you too, like the freedom that comes with the finances, so that I had options, so that we could be in summer in San Diego and avoid the Texas heat, so that we could, right, all of these things. And it was getting so frustrating because I felt like God had called me to it. I felt like I had all the knowledge. I honestly felt like I had a PhD in entrepreneurship, yet still it wasn't working. I wonder if that is where you are. And this is the point where I became so obsessed with why am I not thinking the way they think? And if you know me, or if this is your first time hearing me, that's why I say the DR in Dr. Shannon Irvin is desperate enough, because I was trying to solve my own entrepreneur glass ceiling when I went and got a PhD in neuropsychology. And in those rooms, I just like a typical entrepreneur, right? We solve problems, but I was invested in this problem because I had the problem. Like I had the problem. I could make sales, but I couldn't create what I saw behind my eyes, as my friend Tia Woods talks about. So as I was in those rooms, I started understanding why the brain blocks this growth and why the patterns of thinking weren't in automation for me. And as I started breaking it down, and you've probably heard the story if you listen to the podcast at all, but I started asking even the professors, can we start to combine this to remove limiting beliefs, synaptic pruning? And can we combine neuroplasticity with synaptic pruning to like create this bridge to the place we want? And oh my Lord, they could not wait to get rid of me, because I was the only person discovering that God had already created it all. It was already in scripture. So I was popping off scriptures inside these PhD rooms. So they definitely wanted me gone for that. And then number two, I was solving a problem versus just learning the information. And so I created in that time what we now know and we certify coaches in is our neuro coach model. We coach through that in our coaching program, the 67-day year, because it doesn't need to take you years and years and years to grow your business. You do, however, in 67 days, need to train your brain to think like someone who's at seven figures so that you can move that fast. It's this element of time that is such a differentiator between us and just hear me out. Like from that desperate place on the floor to the PhD rooms, to this idea that we could combine these scientific principles, which were also originated in scripture from God, of course, and we discovered. And I do believe it was divine that sewing together the neurocoach model and testing it out on me. Because remember, I had that same problem where it wasn't going where I wanted it to go. And I know the pain of that, the frustration of that, the sadness of that, the anger that comes along with that. And then the feelings of maybe I don't have it, right? Maybe I'm not enough, all those things. So I just need you to know I'm not a special unicorn, but what started happening was my life, my business within a couple months of applying this neurocoach model to myself broke free. And it wasn't in a strategy, and it wasn't in a tactic, and it wasn't all of a sudden I learned how to do a funnel the right way. I'd known all that, but it was my thinking around that about time, the decisions I was making, the leadership I was holding as an entrepreneur, all the stories around money and what it means and all of that. My thinking started to automate toward where I wanted to be versus where I was. And that was the linchpin. And I knew I wasn't that special. I mean, I'm a good person, but I knew I wasn't a unicorn, that it worked on me and it won't work on anybody else. So at the time, I had 10 one-on-one clients offline, and I was coaching them in their business. I'm a business strategist to the core. And I went to them and I said, okay, you guys know I've been doing, this thing, PhD thing. And they're like, yeah, you're crazy. And I said, can I just take this model that just helped me break through? And yes, we'll keep business coaching, but I want to layer this on top. And I want you to hear that, because if you layer this on top, the game changes for you. And that's why we've opened the door to our coaching program right now. So in the show notes, you want to get in the opportunity to get in this room and layer this on top, right? So I started working with them. Within 30 days, one of my clients, who was a six-figure client at the time, shifted one belief and built this automation toward where he wanted to go. And his business literally skipped seven figures. He went from high six to eight figures within a 30-day window. He didn't learn another strategy, another tactic, another fancy missing piece. He learned to remove those brain-based blocks that have been there, stories from the past that you didn't even create, that he didn't create, And it's scientifically and scripturally possible to do that in 4 steps and just practice it over and over again. It's so simple, yet so many people chase what they can see versus the one thing that will make it be seen, right? And so I started doing this with my 10 clients. Each and every one of them popped within 67 days, 30 to 67 days. And I knew that's when I decided to stop being like the high performance behind the scene, sought after coach, to coming to you and saying, get up off the floor, wipe the tears off your eyes. You've been doing it all right. You have everything strategically you need. Stop that. Take 67 days, layer this on top. So you think like a 7-figure entrepreneur in terms of time, in terms of money, in terms of leadership decisions. And when you train that part of your thinking, then the decisions and the actions, the results just follow. And it doesn't have to be hard. And it doesn't have to, really, take years, because there's this time collapsing that happens. That's why we call it the 67-day year. You do need to release some things. And I always tell everyone, the great news is there's no like deep diving, snorkeling back in your past that's necessary. It's just finding your blind spots, choosing, once we hear from our thinking mind, those blind spots, choosing, do they serve the future we want, or do they stop the future we want? And then if they stop it, the process of removing them that I discovered, used on myself, used on my clients, and now thousands of people online, removes them. If I scan your brain, those blocks are gone. We use the power of synaptic pruning to do that. And it's just 4 simple steps. And it's like having the foot, you've heard me say this a lot, but I just love this metaphor. It's like having the foot on the gas. I don't have to encourage you to do it. You're doing that all day long. But this foot on the brake is keeping you slowing down. And so moving those out of the way allows you to take your foot off the brake, and then training your thinking to align with where you want to go. And then from a brain-based perspective, putting it in automation in your subconscious so it fires without you needing to even think about it. That's where the magic happens, my friends. And so this layering on top, you can see how within 67 short days, now you're prepared to make every strategy, every tactic, every bit of it works now, because the thinking that is operating that now is aligned with where you want to go versus what you know. I want you to hear that again. We train your brain to think like the person where you want to go versus what you currently know. And it's the linchpin. And that's why we have our coaching program. I have a million times over. We also have a certification for coaches, and we certify coaches in the model, because if you're a coach, it's the only right way to coach, because most coaching modalities out there give you symptom-based shifts in the moment. And then you've seen this. If you're a coach, you're like, I get them shifted, but then they go right back. Yes, because those automations are running. So when you learn the right way to coach through a true transformational model, and this is your brain-based transformational model, your client never goes back to old broken belief patterns, and they catapult toward their future. And so the certification is a very important piece of the puzzle. And if you're hearing this and you're a coach and you're like, I need to get certified, just reach out to us and we'll get you on a call. But every entrepreneur, if you're just getting started, if you're at 10K a month, or you're struggling to be consistent at that, if you're at 10K months, but you're going for $1 million months and you can't figure out how to bridge that gap, this is the linchpin. And so you owe it to yourself to have this skill. And this is the greatest news of all. If I can summarize all the investment in my PhD, all $300,000 of that, I would say it's this, that you are the creator of your thoughts. And there is a step-by-step process to train your thinking to be like your 7-figure version of yourself, or your 8-figure version of yourself, versus being the version of what you currently know. And so the doors are open and will continue to be open. The link is down below. You can either do like a self-study version, or if you know you want to go really, really fast, make sure you get the version with the coaching, with the accountability, where we literally hold your hands for those 67 days and walk you through that path. And it is the linchpin. It changed the game for me. And look, I know there are other things out there. And here's what I want to say about it. I'll say a lot of times I'll hear like, what about manifestation? What about affirmations? What about doing all this stuff? It's not that those things are bad, but they're like putting a lipstick on top of a pig, or like a wet blanket on a dog. Like, it looks different, right? But unfortunately, it's a symptom-based tool. It's not a bad tool. It's just a surface level tool versus a deep brain-based tool that is 100% transformation and never needing to go back, and always having the skill when you go from under 6 to 6, 6 to 7, and 7 to 8. You'll have the tools and the steps to never get stuck again. And at the end of the day, this is what we do as entrepreneurs. We want to change people's lives, and there's people waiting for you to do that on such a big level so that they can get set free, right? You want to change your own family's lives and generational lives, legacy level things where your family was going this way. This was it for me. Like, my family was going this way. And because I did this and layered it on top of my business acumen, we went this way. And now my children are training their thinking and getting out of self-confidence issues and all of those kind of things because they have the tools. They're not going to try harder or just listen to somebody else's version. Like, affirmations is just somebody else's ideas. They know how individually to go and train their brain for what they want. And that makes a difference for not just you, but your whole family. So the link's below to join the coaching program. It is the best business investment. Yes, it's a tax write-off, but here's the thing. When you grow your leadership as a 7-figure entrepreneur, somebody who's going to be, when you grow your thinking and train it to be aligned with where you want to go, and you remove any of the blocks that have your foot on the brake, all of it works. All right. You can tell I'm passionate about this. This is exactly why we have the coaching program we have, because it is my mission in life to see you set free to that destination of 6, 7, and 8 figures. All right. That's what I have for you this week on the Epic Success Podcast. See you next week. Bye for now. You've been listening to the Epic Success Podcast with Dr. Shannon Irvin. See you next week for the next breakdown of 7-figure thinking. Bye for now.